This is the Team Objection podcast for July 9th, 2020, episode 444. And remember last week when we were ranking Pixar movies and we got halfway through and we're like, we'll definitely come back to it next week. We lied.
We will get back to it.
We lied on two fronts, really, because we said we'll do it next week and we didn't because we took last week off.
Yeah.
And then this week we're not doing it. So we lied twice.
I did tell people we were going to take the week off, so that's okay. If they may have forgotten or if they didn't listen to the show, they're like, where's the episode? Well, we were off for the 4th. But we thought there was something more timely that needed to be addressed. It's something that Dave and I had both experienced previously, that Shaun had not, but was doing it for the first time this past weekend. And it's trendy right now. There are a lot of people who didn't have a chance to see this live, who got the first chance to do it when it came out on Disney Plus last Friday. And of course, by now, you've probably figured out that we're talking about the world sensation known as Hamilton.
I had a bunch of real talk that I was going to start the episode with, but you already made a segue, and it was a good one. So
I forgot about that.
Let's just keep going.
Usually you jump in right after I finish the episode intro, though, so I was like...
I know, but you were on a roll, and I was like, oh, do I really want to do this, Sam? No, especially now with what I was going to interrupt with. So maybe next time. Next week.
It harkens back to the early episodes, which we talk about sometimes on here, but it used to be something like that I would actually have kind of like sketched out in my head before the episode started so that it would seem like I was comfortable in the beginning. Now I just fucking freeball it. I don't even care. I'm just like, all right, here's a sentence about the intro. Cool.
And back in the beginning, I probably interrupted you more because that's what I especially used to do. Anything you see of me, listeners, that you think, wow, that's annoying or that is just over the top, you're not wrong, but just imagine that times about 10 in the early to mid show.
I'd like to say episodes like 50 to 100. Just pick any one of those.
Even like 30. Even like 10 to 200 probably. It's a wide range. And, you know, people get older. You start a family. You kind of, you mellow out.
It was okay. Anyway, Hamilton. Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Sure. I actually used to write out the intro for the record.
That's crazy.
I mean, when I have meetings, I write out the entire meeting still. So I get it. I get it.
No more.
So, I gotta say, I'll say my background of this. I have listened to this CD and can probably recite the entire play from memory before watching it, before I even saw it live at my local theater. So I knew this very well going in. I still enjoyed the hell out of this. Chris, I know you've seen it.
I saw it from the nosebleeds in Chicago. Not original cast, obviously. It was 3 years ago almost. Still a really good cast. I thought they did a pretty damn good job. I'm not necessarily surprised to hear that the experience in Chicago was better than the one at Gamage in Phoenix. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I saw it from, I think, 3 rows back from the back row, or up from the back row. So it was very difficult to make certain things out. I can see some of the choreography better as a result, because I can see the whole stage pretty easily. But little details like, say, somebody pulling a tablecloth off of a table as somebody jumps up off of it, no clue. Mm-hmm. Brand new to me when I watched it here, because I was like, oh.
So anyway, my point in that sense is that I'm almost most interested in Shaun's, because I don't think you really heard much of this coming in, did you, Shaun?
No. Okay. No.
You obviously knew of it. You had heard about it. But
I have a couple things. One is if Dave can really recite the whole thing, I have two. One is I challenge that because I'm watching the whole thing and I'm like, Jesus, this looks hard to do. Holy cow. And it's all like lyrical verse at the lowest like level. At the highest level, it's like rapid rap. So I do want to challenge that. If it's true, what are we doing? We should hook Dave up to a mic, and Dave does a solo the entire production by himself.
I have a video of me doing My Shot, the entire song of My Shot, every single part on karaoke. I have a video of it on my iPad.
Then you only need about 2 hours and 37 more minutes of improv, and we'll get you. Yeah, so I'm sorry, you're asking for the only exposure I had at all was the ads on the radio for the movie for Disney Plus, where what was the $10 for a father without a father, that line over
founding father who got
yeah we get it. Well, that'll come later, Dave. And then we played the room where it happened in Rock Band, which is funny because I thought this song is not that great. But I think once you hear it in the context, it's very good.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm ready to give all the details on my take of it. But to start us off, like, you guys both saw it live. So what did you think was retained and what did you think was lost? Chris, you mentioned a little bit of it, but specifically in the filming of it, I'm interested in that dichotomy.
So I had read something early on that this was footage taken from like a rehearsal or a practice performance. So to find out that instead it was done in front of an actual audience, remove the one big thing I thought was going to be lacking, which was audience reaction, particularly when it pertains to King George, who, you know, essentially steals the show that as it's happening around him, especially in the second act. So I had thought, well, it's like, man, half the fun of that is him with his, you know, quirky mannerisms and lighthearted, I'm going to kill your family stuff, and it's going to be dead. Well, there was an audience. So my main concern was already gone from the beginning. My second concern was one that you had voiced prior as well, which was it's just going to be like either a static camera or maybe just a handful of them, but it's not really going to involve a lot of switching or a lot of, you know, like well done work. I'm not saying this was expertly filmed, but it was more than adequate.
For the resources that they had, the fact that they got this many camera angles, one of the things I heard, Chris, actually they did is they did a combination of things. They did a filming of the live show, and then for some of the close-ups that they got during the show, they used actually during a practice or a rehearsal or a separate performance without an audience there, so they could get some of those close-up on the facial features. So it was a combination of both, but you're right. I mean, they did a fantastic job of getting a whole bunch of different angles and drawing your eye to what they wanted to see, which had to be a different experience for you, Chris, seeing from up high where you could just see whatever you wanted. It's such a crazy different way to experience something like this.
There's a few different times where they would pull focus from somebody either in the foreground or background just to spotlight somebody else, either because they were the one either singing or rapping or performing at the time, or because they had a reaction, which, again, no way in hell in the nosebleeds am I going to see somebody's facial expressions. So, like, I could see like Lin-Manuel, for example, just, or anybody really emoting a lot more than I ever could have up there, where it had to be really blatant. Otherwise, it wasn't happening.
That was the biggest thing for me in seeing the movie versus seeing it live, because I saw it. I was not lower level, but I wasn't also upper level. Kind of sat in the middle area when I went, and it was crazy to see the facial responses, there's so much more emotion that you could see in those close-ups than you can see from a farther seat away, and also seeing the actors how they have to almost overact. It was almost jarring to see the movie because they were so overly facial expressions, or really like trying to give so much emotion in their face because they're trying to project out to an audience as opposed to camera that's right in their face. So it's kind of interesting seeing that.
Yeah, I thought it was cool though. Oh, good. Okay, I thought my dog was moving that mic. Behind the scenes, I was really impressed with how much I connected to the characters. Again, I found the lack of exposition jarring at first. Because Chris had told me, like, yeah, there is no, like, where they calm down and they talk for a bit and then they go back into music. Really, again, the slowest that they go is like that lyrical verse. And even then, they don't really do it that much. It's really just song to song to song. And I was concerned that wouldn't allow me to connect with the characters. I do have maybe a flaw that I'll bring up later, potentially. But I will say I was impressed by how much the acting and the little flourishes that the actors give, and really even through the song, the things that they sing about through the music, and the music itself really helped you connect to those characters.
What I find amazing is the fact of, like I said, yeah, there's no slowing down, like you said, but the lyrics tell the story and the emotions so well of all these characters, despite the fact that it is a big musical production. And they do such a good job with the ensemble and the cast telling who these characters are, even though they're rapping a song or singing a song, which is normally a lot of Broadway shows you see. It's like you're going to get everything. Your plot is going to be in the talking and the dialogue, and then your just fun show-stopping numbers are in the song. But this is all that mixed together, and it's such an awesome fusion. And that's what's cool about actually listening to it on the cast album, when you can listen to it outside of the show, is that you don't miss anything. You don't miss a thing at all if you listen to the cast album. You get the whole experience, except, you know, obviously not the visuals, but you get all of the story right there.
Yeah. Well, and that's the visuals were great. That was, to me, I'm watching it, I'm like telling a story of one of the founding fathers and all that stuff that was going on then in like hip hop and a lot of these music stylings, you didn't really need innovative or interesting stage work. Like it was, you could have, but you didn't need it. And what they did with the rotating stage and all of that, and the effect that that had, not just visually but like metaphorically, a lot of times people getting swept away or whatever, that was really impressive. I heard that it's even better live though. The way that the cameras worked, you don't get the entire sense of that movement and where things are going. And that just kind of brings me to like, that was one of the flaws that I read, is like the camera work was bad. And I'm like, again, for someone who hasn't seen the show live, who probably I would love to, it's going to be a while, if ever, that I can. I was very grateful for even middling camera work. Like I didn't see that and say like this is a bad show because the camera sucked. It was a very small concern for the ability to get to watch such a great show.
So I man, the turntable thing was for me the coolest part of the stage work. There's one scene in particular, I think it was during Satisfied, where Hamilton has his hand out to Angelica and she spins away, and then Eliza spins into him, kind of like, oh yeah, I'm going to be your wife type of thing. And
Yep.
it's just like the coolest choreography of this. And I don't know, the people who are critiquing the cam work are really nitpicking on that type of stuff.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And I think they were sort of in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, because they were taking a stage version of the show and just plopping cameras in front of it. And it's like, well, to Dave's point earlier, they were able to kind of splice together some footage from what it sounds like from some different approaches to it. One in front of a live audience, one from some practice to get some different shots. Great. It's like they weren't going to take the time, especially back then, not knowing that there was like, wasn't this originally supposed to be for a different purpose?
It was supposed to be, I think, this movie, but it was supposed to be released next year.
But in like a major theatrical release, right? Okay.
Theaters.
So similar still, but the idea being like, okay, so they're used to projecting out to a stage, like you said, which is very different than doing something for up close. That's why the transition between film actors and theater actors and TV is all very different, even though they're all acting, right? So here I thought, again, given the parameters, I mean, was it perfect? No. And there were a couple of shots that did feel a little bit jarring, like they didn't have a really good angle for what they wanted, so they had to go with the best available. But I thought it was like a B+ at worst.
Oh, yeah, at worst. With working with what they had with, I mean, I thought they did an amazing job with what they had with, because a lot of people could have been pretty happy with the static camera and just like, here, I get to watch the play.
Yeah. That's what I thought we were getting into at one point. And I was like, so the fact there was a B+, I would have been happy with like a D, which would have been just plopping the camera up there. That would have been great.
We get new media that 90% of people hadn't had a chance to experience in the middle of this pandemic to help kind of stem the tide a bit. That would have been fine. And that static camera, even if it was just the one that started, which kind of showed the whole stage, was still twice as close as I was. So it still would have had some new stuff for me in there. And
like, I would love at some point to watch an actual theatrical adaptation. But this wasn't that. I don't think it was ever, at least advertised. Like, it was never sold as that. I knew what I was getting into, and I thought it was excellent.
So from what I can gather, I was never lucky enough to see the original cast in Broadway. My parents did, and I know my parents went and saw it in 2015, so kind of before it blew up. And I watched this with my dad on TV, and you could see like the goosebumps on his arm. Like, he was basically geeking out over this, which was so cool to see, because my dad doesn't usually do that type of stuff. And it was he was telling me stories of just like when he saw this the first time, some of the production that was in there, the songs, the lyrics, was basically, he would like turn to my mom who's sitting next to him and just be like, did you see this shit? Like, did you see this? Like, that type of thing. I mean, I don't know. I'm going to maybe gush for all, just the ability that they had to integrate these amazing, like the dance moves they have in there, and the work of the ensemble, to me, is the craziest thing. How they have these people that are in the background tell a story with not super complex moves, but they are part of the story. There's like one part in Say No to This particularly, like all of the ensemble basically is surrounding Hamilton saying, no, 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 like, don't do it, and yet he like pushes them off essentially. And it's just like little things like that that they constantly use the ensemble to tell the story even deeper, as they're almost part of the set. It's so cool.
A lot of moving parts.
Is there some sort of like fate that's supposed to be like intervening? Is that like what that some of the background actors are there for? Because I noticed early on, it was very cool. There was like a bullet that looked like it was meant for him that was like readjusted, and it was like what I took. Again, this is the first time I've ever seen it, so it's a lot to kind of gather at once, but it was like there was some sort of fate was protecting him, obviously up to a point, until he gets shot by someone who is a terrible shot.
Spoiler.
He says in the first minute of the show,
history.
And also history. But yeah.
Yeah.
Because that would be cool. And that's just like another interesting thing that you didn't really need in your fictional, biographical sort of musical, but he threw it in there.
Yeah.
And that was really cool.
So I've kind of read about this. Like I said, I kind of geeked out. But like that character that you're talking about is specifically an ensemble character that they call the Bullet. And she is supposed to be the harbinger of death almost. She's the one that tells Philip Hamilton where to find George Eaker after the duel that kills Philip Hamilton. She's the one that carried in the last thing where Burr fires his shot. She's the one that slowly moves the bullet across the stage to hit Hamilton. She has such an intricate thing of death essentially that brings that type of thing. So they have a role and a thought process behind her character. Like if you deeper you dive into some of the stuff that was planned out, the more you're just like, you planned this?
Yeah.
Like, you didn't stumble into this? This is insane. They have stuff where they talk about how the turntable, if it turns clockwise, it's moving time forward passing, or sorry, counterclockwise, it's moving time forward passing. It's moving clockwise, it's changing, like static, like things are holding in place, or people are looking back on their past type of thing. Like there's so much symbolism and significance in this.
Yeah.
Blows your mind. Blows you all away.
That's the stuff that I love. I love noticing like, oh, it's turning this way, and it seems to indicate like going forward. If when it's the opposite way, it's the past. Yeah, and again, like, so you start getting into the love story, and I kind of roll my eyes because I'm like, of course, it's a musical, you have to have a love story. And it's like he read my mind, because it was like, we're going to give you a love story, but we're going to do it in the weirdest, craziest way that we can. We're going to present something that seems straightforward. And then right when you get comfortable, we're going to completely subvert that and go back in time and show you like all the stuff that actually went into it, the perspectives of different characters and what they were thinking. And it will kind of like the time will meet up again. And it was great. It was awesome. Like, I love that.
Yeah. It's the cool, like you can see it, like it's the coolest thing. That whole sequence from helpless to satisfied is just like, oh, you're like you said, like, oh, cool. There's this cool story of how they met at this party, and then if you watch the actors too, they literally reverse. Like they play a reverse type of soundtrack, and they are all going backwards. And then as they finish the song "Helpless" and get back, the lighting changes from blue to a bigger, whiter type of light, just to kind of show everybody, and everybody moves right back into the position they were when the song started to finish it off. It's such good choreography. It's such a cool way of telling this love story, like you said.
Yeah. So much more interesting than like later on having her be like retrospective and being like, oh man, I really messed up. No, you're actually seeing it like happen right in front of you
while she's giving the maid of honor speech.
Yep.
How interesting it is that so many different people have a chance to shine in this, because there's the main characters who are doing a lot of legwork, particularly Hamilton and Burr, but there's several others that are right up there with them. But we mentioned King George already. Again, just absolute clown, but everybody's probably, I don't want to say main takeaway, but like if there's one figure that sticks out besides maybe Hamilton himself, it's him, because his numbers just kind of resonate very differently than everything else does. But think about like Lafayette, who's not around for a ton, but is definitely gets some of the biggest reactions from the crowd. Or Thomas Jefferson shows up after the intermission.
He's like my favorite, and he's like the villain, but like I didn't feel that way. I liked him a lot.
He's just hamming it up from the word go. He wasn't even in the first half of the play.
Yep.
And yeah, so it's cool that everybody gets a chance to shine. The females have plenty to do. I I would argue maybe a couple of the best performances are from the female side in this entire show, because I think Lin-Manuel is a good performer, and the fact that he can keep up with some of this really, really fast-paced stuff is still impressive, and he has a good singing voice. I don't think performing is his best suit. Everything else he's done here is much more impressive to me than what he does on the stage, but he's surrounded himself with a lot of people of color, all of which are not just there as token appearances. They're there because they're fucking good.
Yeah.
But you said the women probably give the best performance. I agree wholeheartly. The introduction, the Schuyler Sisters song, where they introduce them, Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy. Like the fact, like the way they introduce them, they hit you in the face. Like, we're here. We're not just women that are going to be in the background doting. Like, we are important to this story, and they hit you over the head with this instantly. And there's, Eliza, who's the more pretty type of reserved, introspective, thoughtful person who's going to help take care of you. And then Angelica, who's in your face saying that, when they have the sequel, I'm going to include women in the sequel of the Declaration of Independence. Like, they smack you over the head with how good of singers they are and how important they are to the story, and again, like I said, people of color all over, like, they picked such a diverse, talented cast, and they had to nail it, and they did.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved, again, the inventiveness of it. I know there was a show called John Adams on HBO, and portrays Hamilton in a very different light. But at one point, they're talking about, like, civics and finances, and it might be really good, but it's pretty basic in John Adams. Whereas you compare it to, in Hamilton, they rap battle over the, like, little nuances of the law. And maybe it's not... maybe it's too reductive with what is actually the truth here, but, like, who cares? And we might get to this topic later. It's like, it's entertaining. It is interesting, and it's, like, creative. It's so innovative the way that they do it, and they did it twice. And that was my favorite part of the show, both times. It was so good.
That's what got me started on this show, to be honest, is I heard the cabinet battles to start, and I was like, holy shit, this is funny. Like, our King Louis's head is now in a basket. Would you like to take it out and ask it? Like, such a good line. I don't know, watching the movie and watching the show, George Washington hyping up a cabinet battle, like, yeah, get up, like that type of thing.
Well, but they know, again, in subverting expectations and knowing exactly what expectations you have, they know what they're doing, because they're like, it's fine. It's what you all came for. A cabinet meeting. And you're like, oh yeah, but then they make it like one of the best parts of the show.
Yeah, I love that part. Like, and Jefferson is such a coy, like, he's such a great character in that moment. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, Daveed Diggs is just awesome.
Oh,
I was gonna say, what's interesting is that the subversion of expectations goes back to the beginning, and I showed Shaun right after we finished the musical, Lin-Manuel's performance at the White House at the Poetry Slam in 2010. Where nobody knows who the hell... I mean, a handful of people probably know who he is at that point, but nobody really knows what's going on with it. And he presents the first song where he's doing it instead of... he's not Hamilton, he's being Burr in that song, but he presents the first song as being about one of, like, the greatest rap battlers in history, and he pauses for that beat and says Alexander Hamilton, and there's this kind of, like, delayed, like, smattering of laughs and, like, surprise, because who's going to expect that to be the end of that sentence? At a very base level, back in the beginning, when he'd only had that first number finished to present to the crowd there with the Obamas, that subversion was there. It's just extended throughout the entire play with the finished result, which is cool.
It was interesting too that, like, I didn't. The music was. I'm going to be alone in this. The music was good. While I was watching it, I was more interested in how sharp and creative the lyrics were, but not necessarily like, oh, this is something that I'm going to go listen to in my car. I watch Wicked, and, like, Defying Gravity was like, oh man, this is amazing. I want to go listen to this. When I was watching it, I was like, this is great for the work that it's doing, but I don't need to go, like, pick this up in my car. I found myself for the last, like, 3 nights as I'm falling asleep, I have, like, a bunch of the songs stuck in my head. And, like, as I'm drifting, just, like, over and over, like, the best lines of the show, the ones that stuck out to me. And I'm like, that must mean something. It must mean something that's continuing to resonate with me long after I watched it. And only once.
So I first listened to this the cast album in November of 2016. I think is when I first started listening to it. I still put it on in my car to this
Yeah.
day. And like I said, I basically know the whole thing and I still put it on. It is so, you pick up on so many more lyrics, you pick up on so many more little things in it that you didn't pick up the first time. I mean,
Oh.
I was driving in the car like on a road trip with my wife, and Courtney says to me, "Oh, did you hear this part? Like, at the very end of Wait For It, for example, Burr says, 'I'm willing to wait for it.' Like he waits that extra beat, and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't catch like that was intentional to wait that extra beat because he waited for it. There's so
Well,
many things that you hear again and again after repeat listenings.
yeah, and I want to run an experiment where after the first song, how many times or maybe not even how many times because it's a lot, but like how many songs after the first one make a reference to a previous song that has been sung, either a line or a phrase, or even just a word. It happened a lot, and I like to think a lot of them. I am sure I missed a lot too. There's a throwaway line, or you're like, oh man, they're really ramming this line in. I wonder why that is, and then they bring it back later, and you're like, oh, I see. It's so creative on that on that end too.
They use that in for motifs a lot. Like
Yeah.
Hamilton has his own method to his thing. Like for example, when they introduce Jefferson, they have the whole song of "What Did I Miss," and they have this tune, and then when Hamilton introduces himself, he goes back to the Alexander Hamilton. Like he says it in that tone instead of the tone of the song that's playing right now, because he's working, he's himself, he's doing what his own thing is. And so they do that type of stuff a lot where they throw in that type of like same lyric from earlier or call back to that type of melodic. Even the melodies they call back to a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, they do that a lot, and they do that a fantastic job. So I'm glad you picked up on that.
I think it's awesome that there's so many different callbacks in it, and there's something kind of for everybody. You still get these kind of bigger musical numbers. There's probably more rap, more quick lyrics than anything else, but there are still a handful of like traditional big ensemble numbers. The opener, obviously, Room Where It Happened in certain parts. There's a few others that stick out more musically. I think Satisfied is probably the most impressive musical, just straight up like song in the entire show. But there's also plenty of other stuff for people that had not really attended any kind of theater play before. Now, maybe that creates a weird expectation where it's like, oh, I haven't really gone to the theater before, and is it all like this? And the answer is unequivocally no. But because it is different, I think that's why so many people latched onto it. Between the cast and the fact that the soundtrack was unlike a ton of other things, there were other examples of this before Hamilton. It's not like Hamilton was like, oh, it's the first rap musical, but it was the first to latch on like this. And if that gets more people to go to theater, to me, it's the same thing as like we've got a dozen or more different symphony concerts that have done video game music. And there are some purists that are like, well, who cares about this crap? We need to be focusing more on Mozart and blah, blah, blah. It's like, look, you're shutting off part of your audience. If this is different but really good and it gets people to come in the building and be more curious about it, good. And this works twofold. One, for theater, and two, for history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, I think that's part of it. It is, I think, a factor in how people got onto this, and so why it became the phenomenon that it did really is, one, obviously the cast is amazing, two, the songs are catchy and good, and the production's amazing, but also having that historical element. Everybody, at least in America, most everybody has some familiarity with this. You're going to talk about, oh, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. Yeah, I know who these people are. I've heard about them. I've studied them. Like, you're going to tell me that I'm going to see a play where I'm going to have these people that I've heard about my entire life, and they're going to be a completely different type of portrayal. Awesome. Like that draws people in.
Chris, you actually just touched on it too. Well, and you, Dave, too. Both of you did. You're so great, both of you. Because in school, like if it came up, your teacher, half asleep, would be like, Alexander Hamilton wrote 51 essays supporting the Constitution. Flip the page, and that's not interesting. When you say he is so driven, and he wrote, I believe the number was 51, when some other guy wrote like 29, and another guy wrote 5, and you're like, this is how motivated this person is. He was working his ass off, and then you build it into this rivalry with another character. All of a sudden, that's interesting, and I find myself being like, I kind of want to go research Alexander Hamilton. Am I going to look at the musical and say, yeah, I'm not going to cite it for a paper that I'm writing, but it makes me more interested in finding out the true story. And I think that's like, how could you complain about that?
No, it is such a good bridge. Like, yeah, I've heard people's complaints that, oh, well, this isn't exactly true. Angelica was actually already married when she met Hamilton. The Schuyler sisters actually had brothers already. Hamilton didn't actually die immediately after.
Oh,
dying like Dave just died. Oh,
it was inevitable, I suppose. Well, that's a very bad look for him now.
I know. Are we?
Let's all relish in this. Oh, we're going to roll for the time being. We'll see
Okay.
if Dave catches back up. It's going to be a torrent of activity. Yeah. It's a shame because he was making a good point, too. And he's trying to up the. You saw the video. If
Yep.
you're watching on YouTube,
He's
you
aware.
saw the video catch up. I think he's here. Are you here, Dave?
I am here.
Dave,
All right. From the top, start over. I know normally we don't like to repeat our beats, but we're going to have to here.
We heard the point about Angelica was already married. He didn't die right after.
Yep.
Good night.
You know what? Why not? The thing's already off the rails anyways.
They
So
couldn't have come in while I was frozen. No.
that would have been funny. They would have been like, was this just ghost children? What is that?
My point was like there was inaccuracies in there. Hamilton didn't fight the duel with Burr immediately after he endorsed Jefferson in the election of 1800. Angelica was already married when she met Hamilton, and in fact, the Schuyler sisters actually had brothers already. That's one of the lines in the song is "My father has no sons." Well, they did. So, but regardless, it doesn't matter because it's the bridge. Like you said, you're not going to cite this in a paper. But it's the bridge to people to get interested in it and see, like, have this entire other spin as opposed to, like you said, Shaun, this, oh, great, Hamilton was the first Secretary of Treasury instead of I know so much more about just at least some ideas and, just kind of overarching ideas about these people that I wouldn't have known as before.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I didn't know Thomas Jefferson was such an asshole. No, so I do want to. The only flaw that I noticed while watching was I felt like on one of those movies where you're like, the characters were great. Like there's so many good moments. It was a character-driven thing. The plot was kind of meh, but the characters were excellent. And I felt myself at a couple times being like, I don't know if I felt this way because it was all musical, so there's not that exposition to buffer things, but it felt like two fronts. One is we fit a whole lot, huge gaps of time, decades into 2.5 hours. And because of that, some of the story beats didn't have the same landing for me that they probably could have otherwise. The one that I'm thinking of specifically, but I noted this happening a couple different times, is there was a point where Eliza erases herself from the narrative and then within a song is back in the narrative. And you have a couple like that where like a character has to deal with loss, but then by the next song, they have overcome it already.
Yeah,
or they don't have that loss anymore.
It happens with his son too. It's like, all right, you're about to have a son. He's 9. He's 19. He's dead. And you're like,
yes.
What? Like you can get whiplash. And now, granted, I'm not saying they should have spent more time on it. Like it makes sense to have just eliminated everything else in between. That's the important stuff. It makes sense, sure. But I'm with you in the sense of like some things, other than maybe like a throwaway line at the start of a song about what year it is, all of a sudden it's just like, boom, we just jumped a decade. Here we go. Like, and because there's no narrative beats in between, it's all happening just between numbers. Which, I mean, the show's 2:45. So I don't know how much more they could have or even should have included.
Yeah.
But I think it's still a fair criticism to be like, especially on our first viewing, you can miss some stuff because you're like, wait, what? She was just gone. Now she's back. He was just born. Now he's dead. Like, okay, it is a little bit of whiplash.
I will say, I mean, you're right. Like, you're right. That is a tough thing. But a couple things. One, I heard that because of the pace of the show and the amount of words they fit in, I was just watching a video on this last night. If they spoke the words at a rate of the average Broadway play, the show would be about 6 hours long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
It fits so many words into such a quick thing. Like, for example, in Guns and Ships, Daveed Diggs says 19 words in 3 seconds.
Yeah, that'll do it.
And to go back to Satisfy, that some of those beats in the verses are just like super fast. And imagine her trying to do that in a regular setting. Like, take 3 times as long.
I will try to do Guns and Ships if you want me to later, but because I know it. Anyway,
Yeah, I might have to do the whole thing, Dave. I don't know if
I'll be prepared for a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah.
All right.
No breaks either.
The other thing they do is really well though is they do a good job of costuming, I think, to show the movement of time. Like they do well of just, and it's simple. It's just changing the jackets. That's changing some of the dresses, changing some of the jackets. And I think they do a good job of showing the movement of times with some of the lighting, the background, the costuming, that type of thing.
I actually heard that a lot of the characters, what do you call this? The
arm
the
gestures.
body, the butt gesture. Thank you.
Gesticulate.
Yeah. A little bit more subdued the older that they get. I didn't notice it. It is what I read. And I thought that is an interesting touch as well. When they're younger, they're more passionate and they're moving all over the place. And then as the years kind of go on, except I would suppose, with the exception of Thomas Jefferson, everybody kind of calms down a little bit. And I think that's cool too. So there's a lot, again, the flaw that I had, it's interesting because I had that thought. I don't really know how you fix it. And it might just be me needing to get used to really a different style of storytelling, and that's fine. But it's just a thought that I had that we're really moving through these beats. Would I want them to cut out part of it? No, not really. I think the whole thing is interesting, but we fit a whole hell of a lot in. Which half did you like more, out of curiosity?
I'm gonna let Chris answer first because I don't know.
I think the first. I have nothing against the back half, and Rumor It Happens my favorite number in the whole thing. Who Tells Your Story is also very, very good. I just feel like if I'm thinking back to what I remember the most from it, 70% of it's the first part. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's just because the up-and-coming story is more interesting than once they've won the war, essentially. Now they're trying to sort out the new America, and then it's more bogged down by the politics. I think the rap battles are excellent, but I think it's the first half for me.
I may have tipped my hand already, but I enjoyed the first half. It got me in and so engaged and invested. But I think maybe that story thing happens more where it's like, we're in the war. Things are looking bad. Things are looking better. We've won. It's like, wow, great. Whereas in the back, they somewhat slow things down and they really get in on, I think it's so interesting to explore like the war and stuff, even though it's real history we're talking about. It's almost like I've seen that before, but when you win, and King George hints at this, it's not like the happy ending now. It's like now that the real work starts, and I found that really compelling.
Winning was easy, son. Governing's harder.
Yeah.
That's another one of those lines that keeps coming back, though. There's 3 different variations to that line about something else being easy and something else being harder as Washington keeps doling out this fatherly advice.
Yep.
Dying is easy, son. Living is harder. Yeah. I told you I could do the whole thing. God, first half or second half better. I think I'm going to go probably second half, and because of the cabinet battles, Room Where It Happens, and Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, I do love Thomas Jefferson.
Playing off of each other too is amazing.
Yeah, Madison's a great foil for Jefferson.
My favorite bit, honestly, might be the intro. I love the intro song. It's so good.
It perfectly. You said there's no expedition. That was the exposition. Here, I'm going to lay out what's going on.
Yeah,
Lay out everything.
Well, I think that into my shot is a good way to just kind of let everybody know what's going on right from the very beginning, because you establish pretty much everybody who's a major player. Mm-hmm. Except for, I guess, like Jefferson and Washington. But like most of the main players you establish in the beginning, and you give them, all right, here's what we're doing. This is the groundwork now. So everything that follows, you already kind of have a taste for.
Yeah.
I love the amount of times, I'm just going through it in my head again, where a lyric from before comes back. Mm-hmm. It must be like hundreds of times. And I love that. I think that's really good, and it's rewarding for people who are paying attention. Mm-hmm. So I don't think, especially in these days, that we can get through a review of Hamilton without at least touching on some of the controversy. I want to hear what you guys have to say about it. To me, I will note that when I was watching it, I was thinking that there was going to be a more meta-textual, it's not a text, but you know what I mean, reason why a diverse cast was brought into the musical. And I thought that they were either going to like change direction on history like Tarantino likes to do, or really get into some of the issues of slavery or whatever. It wasn't really the case. It turns out he just wanted to give opportunities in an arena where there are not many opportunities. And it worked. He made stars out of Leslie Odom Jr. and Daveed Diggs and many others. So that was great. I'm not going to say I'm disappointed about that, but I was looking for maybe some kind of metatextual thing or some deeper examination. And it didn't happen. I will note that, but it didn't really detract from the overall experience for me.
I heard a description, and I think it's actually this. Actually, I didn't hear it. I read it. The description they put on Disney Plus before you started, like the page that you get to on Disney Plus before you start this. The last line says, "A story about America's past told by America today." And I think that was the meta commentary. If anything else, is that the past was a bunch of old white guys. Basically, they ran everything. That's history. We can't change it. It's not necessarily right that those people, that type of people is in power only, but it doesn't mean that that's how it's going to be forever. And so today, diverse, different thoughts, different talents, telling the story of history, I think is kind of the coolest meta commentary, if you will, and showing how we can move forward as a nation almost, is telling our history with a spin with today. Like
that's true, even if it is. I think a lot of people, especially now, 2020 is very jaded, and I think it has a good right to be, but I think you could say it's an idealistic of today's America. I think a lot of people would argue we're not there yet, but to your point, that's the idea. That's what we're working for. And I think that's a good point. There was a song where they're singing to their kids, and there was some line about like the future's going to be yours. And then they really linger on like the someday, almost to say like, even now we're not there yet, but like we're working and we're trying to get there. So I did feel like there was an awareness of that still, even if it was an idealized representation of it. I think that's okay sometimes.
We still have to confront the fact that it's glorifying slave owners. And apparently in 2020, that is just, it's weird to me that somebody who has as many humanitarian aspects as Lin-Manuel Miranda would then face criticism for something of that level, as though he were inconsiderate or oblivious to the past. Or, I mean, Hamilton mentions a couple different times about this whole hurricane that happened, and as a result, it ended up being kind of poignant when they were able to use Hamilton to raise funds for Puerto Rico after the hurricane hit a few years ago. There's a lot of other causes that he's been adamant about as well, both things he's related to and things he's not. And yet now I think it's just a pushback against cancel culture in general, because when things that you like get canceled, that's what you take offense to. And then you want to cancel other things as well. And that's why this is dangerous, because it's creating this cycle where it's like, all right, well, is anything going to be sacred? Because as you mentioned, Dave, like this was history. This happened. Maybe not exactly. Again, it's not a 100% historical reenactment, but Washington who he was. And maybe he's portrayed more heroically in this film than he actually was, but then again, that's true of all humans. So I don't even have an answer for you. I don't know what to make of half this stuff. I think it's a little silly overall for something like Hamilton, which did so much for so many people. Even if it did have a somewhat negative aspect to it like that, I don't think it by any means overwrites the rest of it. But I don't know where to draw the line anymore, because at this point, I guess nothing is sacred.
See, but I thought they painted him...
Everybody in the show is flawed.
Oh, yeah. Overall, maybe a little bit heroic, right? But pretty complex still. I mean, cheated on his wife. A lot of his stances, I think they did eventually say, he did a good job, but he was challenged a lot for some pretty radical ideas, and they address it in the show. Like, you have to stop and pause and be like, ooh, I don't like the direction he's headed right now. So it's not like they're just venerating him completely. At my work, and I'm sure you guys have this too, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And in this case, very, very good. Is it the absolute perfect show? Well, no, because that's impossible. You wanted it to touch on accurate history, truthfully talk about slavery, make it interesting, make the songs good. Like, perfect is absolutely unattainable, because anything that even attempted to do all that would, by its very nature, it would be too long or whatever, too unfocused. So you have a very, very good thing, but you want to attack the one thing that doesn't work. I don't know.
I have such a difficult time with people calling out the celebration. I'm putting celebration in quotes of people who own slaves, especially in such a long time ago. Like Washington, I mean, I'll go from this angle. So the show mentions at least 6 times abolitionist will never be free till we end slavery. Like John Lawrence wanted to have a black battalion because he wanted to show the strength of the black man. Like there are so many references in this show to the fact of like slavery is wrong. We understand that America should have, at the point of its foundation, ended slavery. It didn't. They couldn't because of different factions, different things. The nation was too young and fragile to end it. So they mention it in the show. Yes, Washington owned slaves, Jefferson owned slaves. It doesn't mean that we can belittle all of their accomplishments to build the nation that became what it is because they owned slaves at the time. We can note it. We can say they shouldn't have. We can say that it was wrong. But it doesn't mean you're going to belittle everything. And saying that a show is wrong because you talk about their accomplishments is just crazy to me.
Well, and it starts to make me wonder, like, unless it is from a very specific lens, does it mean we can't talk about history anymore? Like, we can't even go there? Now, I know it's in a show, but like, can we not include it in entertainment? Is it off limits? And that's why, like, I got into a debate with someone this weekend, and they were like, why are you trying to remove the Confederate flag from the library? And it's like, well, that's not the issue here. I don't think we're trying to erase history. We want to not celebrate it anymore. And I don't think the show is celebrating it, but I mean, it's taking place during that time. Is that off limits now? Can we not do that anymore? So I don't know what to say. I do think it's a smaller group of people who are giving the most. There's a saying for this that there's a dog running in the background that I can't think.
They're a vocal minority.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is getting more and more credence the further we get into the 2000s and now 2010s and 2020s.
But it's crazy to me that the whole cast is just damn about all diverse, and it's like it's a racist show.
It's also strange to me that you can never categorize anything completely anymore. There's so many different voices in the room, but like some of the people who are criticizing Hamilton for this still don't want the Confederate flags being taken down. There is absolutely a Venn diagram of considerable import of people that are like trying to go against Hamilton because of what it represents, but then they're sort of undermining their own argument by then trying to support the Confederate flag. And it's like, if slavery had been abolished right after, say 1800, when the events of this play were finishing up, maybe I could see an argument for that more. It took another 60 years after that to finally get that corrected in this country, and then another 100 to get something passed that maybe gave people equal rights with the Civil Rights Act. And now today, in 2020, we're still having these discussions about race and how people are treated in this country. So it's not that simple. Nothing is simple. People are trying to make things so simple, and I'm getting really sick of it.
It is, and I will say, I know part of why the pendulum has swung so far this way is because it was stuck so far the other way. Mm-hmm. So I would rather honestly have the ability to be too critical on this show, Hamilton, then feel like no one can say anything. I'm grateful for that. I'm glad it's happening. But I can also have my opinion of saying, in this case, I think maybe we're missing the mark just a little bit.
I think that having the discussion is fine. Hashtag cancel Hamilton is like, what?
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Let's cancel a show that has the most diverse cast, not ever maybe, but like one of the most diverse casts in history, to bring a whole new era to Broadway. Let's cancel it because these guys used to own slaves 300 years ago.
And Lin-Manuel said the N-word twice in an audiobook.
Both
like reading an audiobook.
Yeah, exactly. Both references to other people saying it.
Correct.
So if I was to read an audiobook of Mark Twain, I mean, it's in there frequently. It is. Am I going to be
these days,
forever?
man? You take your own risk.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go for something a little happier. Lightning round questions. What's your favorite song in the show overall?
Rumor it happened.
I think I really just like the first number again. And it's hard because the work that it does, and maybe comparing that to like the jauntiness of another one, but I'm going to go with the first one. I don't even know the name. I am such a novice. I don't even know the name of it.
It's just Alexander
Great.
Hamilton. Yep. My Shot is so good. So good. Anyway, can you think of, this might be a tougher one, the rhyme that happened in the show that made you just go, holy shit?
No, but it took place in the rap battle.
Okay.
For sure. Because they had so much venom laced in both sides. It was awesome.
Yeah, was it bend over? Not giving two shits. Bend over. I'll show you where my shoe fits.
No, there was it was good. There was one about the labor and like something about lines like, yeah, of course your labor's great. You don't pay for it, and all of the implications of that was great.
Yeah,
that's an example we didn't mention before, by the way. That fits with the other ones you mentioned.
Yeah,
talking about what was happening at that time. Yeah, I don't know if any one in particular jumps out at me. I am just more impressed by the overall feat of the rhymes and the lyrics and the words that are put together. There are anachronistic references in here that still work perfectly fine. There are plenty of more modernized takes on what was happening back then, putting it in language that's more understandable today, even though it's describing what happened back then. But I don't know if there's anything one in particular that stands out to me. It helped having captions on this, for what it's worth. Being able to see those, which obviously was not happening live and wouldn't happen if you're listening to it in the car, did help me pick up a few different lines I had not spotted the first time. And I don't know if I would have, just because some of them are so quick and lost in a sea of other impressively written lines where it was like, oh, look, that was what was said. Oh, okay. I get it. That's clever.
Yeah. Maybe one that'll help you. I know the anachronism you're talking about, where in the 10 Dual Commandments, he says, Lee was an experienced and ruinous. Okay, so we're doing this. Was such a good, like, ruinous, this 1700s word with doing this. Like, it's such a good mix of.
Yeah, they do that a lot. The like modern vernacular is, I like the infusion.
Yeah. I know the one that got me the most was Burr was talking to Washington, and he said, I was a captain under General Montgomery until he caught a bullet in the neck in Quebec. And well, in summary, it's like,
yeah,
holy shit.
Yep.
That one gets me every time. It's like, you rhymed two sides of it with a rhyme in the middle. Wow.
Yep. ABBA. It's good stuff.
And some of those rapid fire ones with those weird pacings or cadences are some of the most impressive to me, where it's like the middle of a sentence, but it's the end of a line. So it like carries over, but it does it consistently. And it's like,
there's a lot with Burr, sir. And the Bursar, that is really great. Yeah. So what I want to do is a review of the show and then a review of the movie.
That's going to make me remember what I gave the show.
Yes.
I think it was 5 stars. I don't know.
No, we got to do it out of 10 because this is our rubric.
Oh.
So, okay, here's the problem. I can't, if you're going to compare this to Broadway shows, you're going to compare this to adaptations. Like, the only real Broadway show that I can think of that was translated to a movie recently was Rent. And that was garbage. The movie adaptation of that show was garbage.
No, what about Cats? Cats was really good.
Didn't see that one.
What about Beauty and the Beast?
That was based off more of the animated movie. Point is, that was one of the ones that, I don't know, it's notable. And I didn't like that at all. But if you're going to compare this show to other Broadway shows, this adaptation of a Broadway show to other adaptations into movies of Broadway shows, this can't be anything but 10 out of 10. And I don't, I've said it before, I don't like giving 10 out of 10s very often, but this has everything. Like, I can't.
Yeah, you've been fangirling for the last hour and a half. I think you're allowed to give your first 10 out of 10 here.
Yeah. I give one to Persona 5.
Also deserves it, though.
That means you're on a bad trend, though. You have to stop sometime.
But, I mean, my God, like, I can't give this thing anything but 10. Like I said, I've been listening to this thing for 4.5 years now. Or 3.5 years. I still listen to it frequently. My kids love it.
I'm going to do, for the show itself, I'm going to I'm going to do 9.2 because I can't quite justify a 9.5. And there was the story beats. I will say 9.2 for now. Maybe upon watching it again, I'll be like, oh, okay, it does move fast, but I can totally see the need for that or why it works better or whatever the case may be. But it did stick out to me of, I almost had the thought of like, why even have that song if you're just back now? But it was excellent. And like I said, it resonated with me. And so I'm almost glad we're doing this a couple days later because it really showed me how much all the music and the performances stuck with me. So 9.2. And I mean, honestly, I'm going to give the movie, the recording aspect, like an 8. I still thought it was really good. And yeah, could they have maximized the camera in a few places? I'm sure. But I really appreciated it for what it was.
I'll go live 9.5, movie 9, and part of the reason why it's not an 8.5, because I'm not doing other decimals, is because it was a chance to experience the original cast, which was different from the way that Dave and I both did experience it live, and definitely added something. I thought the cast in Chicago was pretty damn good, and obviously I didn't have anything to compare it against at the time, so it was sort of like those impressions, and now looking back, having seen the original cast, being like, so how did that hold up? But even so, I mean, there's just something to be said for the handful of people, several of which have become stars since then. And for most of them, this was their like big star-making turn. So yeah, not perfect by any means, but if I'm sitting here thinking, what are people missing by watching it this way as opposed to live? It is certainly something, but it is not prohibitive by any means.
Yeah, totally agree.
And I hope that it spurs more people to check out live theater whenever we can have live theater again, because there are productions across the country doing really, really good work in big towns and small. It's not even just a Broadway thing, where there are some talented people in a small town near you who might be putting on good performances. There's, thousands, if not more of that across the country, talented performers. And if this is a chance to expose people to the branch of what that live show was, good.
Yeah. I love live theater. I love, even like you said, the little ones take place in like, at the center in Flagstaff. It's great. Yeah. I love it. And even, what's the line? Leslie Odom Jr. was saying how, going to theater is like going to like a jazz club. It's different every single night. Mm-hmm. The energy, or somebody kind of tweaks a line or, misses a beat, or even if it's excellent, there's no mistakes made, but just the energy is just a little bit different every single time.
Or an audience reaction.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now, that's something you're not going to get. I mean, a movie. Movies are great. I love movies. It's the same fixed thing every time.
Yep. It's the same reason that concerts have that appeal, even for some bands that don't play as well live as they do on a studio setting, because you're sharing that unique experience with the other 15, 20,000 people in the building, and there's other stuff like stage choreography, etc. Well, this is kind of the same thing where you would see different things if you watched it live, like both me and Dave did, either because of our vantage points or because of whatever, but you're getting a good slice of it, and if that slice tells you, I want to go see more live theater, then that's what the main takeaway should be. Yeah. Hopefully it's not. I hope they bring more stage adaptations to film, because then you're going to kill an entire industry, but the industry might be dying anyways because of what we're going through right now. So who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was actually one of my biggest arguments against Roger Ebert, and I think he kind of changes too. And he's dead now anyway, so he can't defend himself. But when he said video games aren't art because they're not a fixed thing, I know this is not what he meant, but in things like theater and musicals, those aren't fixed either. There is performers who change, the energy changes, the reactions change. So unless film and books are the only things you consider art, your argument doesn't make sense. And yeah, I hope it does encourage more people to get out and experience it.
Yeah. Man, I'm glad we got to talk about this because I love it so much.
Yeah, clearly I didn't know you were going to be like the biggest fan on the planet. I was not aware of this.
I didn't know you didn't know that. I am like, it's at everything for me. When I find out that someone likes this, I immediately have a bond with them. So when this comes back to Phoenix here, when we can have live theater again, Shaun, we're going. We'll go see it live together.
I would love that. I would really love that. Yeah. We'll force Chris to pay again to see it, and we'll go and we'll take pictures. And that'll be our new thing. See, we're not just uncultured swine who go to see basketball games. We also go to musicals.
Yeah, I like being diverse in that sense of interests.
I almost saw it a second time when I went back to Chicago, but it was just a little bit too pricey, and it was going to be a similar experience because, again, it's different every night, but the core of it was still exactly the same cast, the same stage, theater, etc. I almost saw it a second time anyways, where I was like, you know what, I could pay $150 again. And I was like, and now that this has happened, I'm glad because it gave me a second way to experience it. And now if I wanted to see it live again, I would. I wouldn't really hesitate if it came to Phoenix or whatever.
I've been to New York twice since I saw it in Phoenix, and both times I looked and it would have been about $500 to $600 for a ticket, and I'm just like, I just can't do it. I want to, but I can't.
Yeah. I don't know if I would have paid more than $200.
Yeah.
Even the first time, that it was reaching a point where it was like, God, I could do so much else with this comparatively. Like that's three $60 video games, which could mean like 200 hours of gameplay for an hour, for a 2.5 hour-ish show, which again was awesome, and I don't regret doing it, whatever. But I would have had to think about it at that price. That's tough.
See, the reason Dave is giving so many 10s is he's just discerning in what he does.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's actually going to take the time to do something, it's probably going to be something good. Otherwise, he don't have the time for it.
I feel like that was a really backhanded.
No, it really wasn't. Trust me. If I want to insult you, Dave,
just hit you with the front of his hand.
I don't need to be cute about it.
The front of his hand will do it. All right, that's the end of this episode of Between Shows. You can find us at objectionnetwork.com and youtube.com/objectionnetwork. We'll see you next week for another episode.